Hey, you guys, welcome back to Beyond the Weekend. This is very exciting for me because I am joined by two longtime friends, Evan and Josh.
Hello.
Hello, fellas. Oh, and look at that. You guys give each other a fist bump. Oh, hey, bring it across the table. Oh, wait, hold on. All right. And so not only do I have you guys here, but then Paul on the other side of the studio. Paul, you are far too far away for a fist bump, but like an air pound.
I feel the love, though. Thank you.
All right. Paul Heath, always good to have you here. But listen, fellas, Evan and Josh. So you guys are here because you're going to share part of your story and part of your friendship, and we're going to get into all that. But this is all part of our podcast series, of course, Beyond the Weekend. That's this podcast. But then this series, it's a 5-part series. So you are here for the 5th and final week, wrapping it up. And I'm so pumped to have you in the studio sharing your story.
Fun. Stoked to be here.
All right. So speaking of fun, to kick things off, we're kicking it off to Mr. Fun himself, Paul Heath.
They call me Mr. Fun.
Paul, do you find yourself more fun because you're sleeping less because you have 2 babies now?
Yeah, you kind of have to get like wacky, or you kind of got to get angry. You know,
Yeah.
so you got to choose. You got to choose
yeah.
wacky.
Yep.
You know, when you're losing some sleep.
What's the wackiest thing that you've done as a result of sleep deprivation?
I don't know. I don't know if I've done anything weird. I think it's usually when you've got your hand, you got one thing in one hand and another thing in another hand, and you're like, I'm gonna go put this in the laundry and this in the sink, and you almost put some clothes in the sink, and that kind of thing happens all the time.
That's just daily for you.
That's a daily thing.
Sure.
Yeah, but other than that, it's pretty great.
That's good.
I got questions for you guys.
Okay.
So here's the first one. If you had to skip lunch or dinner for the rest of your life, which would you choose?
Oh, skip lunch or dinner for the rest of your life? Wow, the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Breakfast is not an option because I feel like a lot of people would skip breakfast.
Yeah, because they skip it naturally.
Yeah.
And this is just the meal time. Not even the type of food.
I don't even want to put lines around it,
Okay.
Yeah, not type of food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
But let's say you can't eat before 4 or something like that,
Josh, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think I would say, well, and I'm taking this pretty seriously. I mean, would I actually do this?
As you should, Josh, because this is nothing but seriousness right now.
Intermittent fasting question right now.
Yeah.
Which meal would you cut?
Take it.
I would give up dinner.
Give up dinner?
Oh, that's surprising.
Okay.
That seems like a hot
So
take.
you
is a hot
eat
take.
lunch at noon, and you're like, I am done until tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Yeah, then you go to bed hungry.
I feel like you're losing so much of the social aspect of dinner.
No, but that's part of it. That's part of it. Because
Okay.
part of what I enjoy the most about dinner is that I get to hang out with my friends.
But you're skipping
and
it.
You're skipping it.
Or worse, you sit there and just watch them
Which
eat.
is a weirdo moment.
You're just the guy at the table watching them.
Okay, and I guess selfishly I was thinking, oh, they will skip dinner in solidarity with me.
Oh, dude, not
no,
true.
no.
eat lunch
that's-
together?
That's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
All right.
No, lunch is important for me because I need that second wind
Okay.
in my workday. I need some
All right.
some
That's fair.
nutrition to get
That's
me
fair.
through.
All
I'm
right,
just
all right,
trying-
But
Josh,
at
that's
dinner,
good.
I could just sip some tea or something.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not
Yeah.
trying to convince you to pick a different answer, but that's
Yeah.
it's Josh's answer. Okay.
The
Evan.
podcast got hostile there for a second.
Evan.
Yeah.
How about you? Based upon your reaction, I'm guessing you're not
I'm
skipping dinner,
gonna
my
say
friend.
dinner because of the social aspect. Because if I'm able to eat the same food for either meal, that was part of the question. I'm gonna go with the next variable, which would be people. So I'd rather eat with people than eat by myself.
Okay, so you're skipping lunch and you're eating dinner.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like if people are listening to this podcast and they have an office job, it's like, which do you either want to eat dinner with your wife or do you want to eat dinner by yourself in
Okay.
the lunch break room? Josh chose the lunch break room. I'm
Okay.
choosing
I did
family.
choose
I'm
that.
choosing Josh. Josh chose himself. Okay. You know?
Okay. All right. Because you want to have dinner with your friends and family.
Yeah, it's
your
the
loved
source of the
ones.
conflict
Sure.
that we're going to
Sure,
talk
sure.
about. I'm just
Okay. All right, that's good because we are talking conflict here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Paul, you or me? Who's up?
I'm gonna skip lunch
You're skipping lunch.
because I don't like going to bed hungry, and it's less likely to happen if I can eat some dinner.
All right, I'm with you. I'm telling you guys right now, I kind of, I do this a lot already, where just based on schedule or whatever else, I will skip lunch a lot. and I'm also not really a breakfast guy. So
Oh,
a
really?
lot of times, I'll do a cup of coffee in the morning, and then my sweet wife is kind enough to remind me if I text her and I'm like, okay, I'm packing up and I'm heading home from the office. She knows that I can get a little hangry, so she'll sometimes remind me, hey, how about you grab a granola bar on your drive home, or she'll ask, she's like, did you do lunch today? And I'll say no, and she'll say, maybe grab a little snack on the way out of your office.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Do you not eat
wise.
breakfast because it makes you feel like slowed down during the day? You don't like.
I don't know. I mean, no. I mean, I'm good with a cup of coffee, and that's it.
Just
so,
not hungry.
Yeah. I'm
What
not
about on the
hungry.
weekends? Weekends different for you?
Yeah,
than office
weekends.
hours?
All bets are off. Yeah.
Okay.
On the weekend, I love to go get a pastry on Friday morning. So I'm going to go look for a cinnamon roll somewhere around Clark County, and I've been trying to try out the best cinnamon rolls around. So
Wow.
yeah.
I'm a big fan of the cinnamon roll too, which I can
Yes.
keep because
Okay.
breakfast and lunch.
Right. You're in. Yep.
No cinnamon rolls for
Yeah.
dinner. I got another question.
All right.
Would you rather wear sweats or Crocs every day for the rest of your life?
Every day for the rest of your life.
Crocs.
Okay.
I already wear Crocs often.
Josh, you didn't have to think about it. You're just bam. You knew it.
Yeah.
All right.
Mud,
No, Crocs.
Hold on.
snow.
What are you wearing right now? Hold on.
I'm wearing.
You're wearing some sort of a chukka boot.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of a croc.
it's
I don't even
true.
know.
That's part of the reason why I like the Crocs. I can just add some variety. It's better for my arches.
Paul, I just crawled underneath the table. Did that screw up the camera
No,
shot
you're
here? Am
good,
I
you're
still there?
good.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely Crocs and jeans.
Okay.
It,
so
it works for me.
All right. So no sweats. What are you saying?
I am not a Crocs guy.
Okay.
I know that it's really popular right now to have Crocs and the widgets on Crocs. Do your kids have Crocs?
Are they called widgets?
They're not
They're
widgets.
called
See-
gibbets.
Gibbets?
Gibbets.
See, the middle school
Yes.
guy doesn't. The
Yes,
middle school guy
yes,
doesn't
yes.
know.
Wait, and did you just ask if my kids have them?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're really popular.
yes.
I remember when I was in middle school when they first came out, and name drop Stefan Baumeister, if you're listening to this, and Nate White.
Stefan.
They had a joke called the Summer of Crocs.
I remember.
This was like a whole thing.
I called
And
like a couple weeks ago. Called them out.
Spencer Metter
Yep,
and-
Yep.
I remember that in your young adult ministry,
Yeah,
college
yeah.
ministry. It was the Summer of Crocs, and that's what I remember. All my leaders when I was in student ministry wearing them, and I was like, I'm never going to do that. And now they're back.
But dude, yeah, I
So
mean,
I'm
that-
going to say sweats.
But that was well over a decade ago.
it was a long time ago,
Yeah.
and I really thought that Crocs were almost like fidget spinners. They were just a fad that was going to die.
Flash in the pan, and they're gone.
No, they're
But no,
big-
they are here.
They're a big business.
So much so that my middle school son has loves to wear Crocs. He'd wear Crocs every single day of his life, and then he's worn out multiple pairs.
That's wild.
So that when the Crocs start to wear a hole in the heel or whatever, he's like, "Hey, Dad, can I get a new pair of Crocs?"
Yeah.
And I know that's one of those gifts that he's gonna love. So
That's
he's
wild.
he gets them.
Yeah, they're trendy.
Yep.
So
Yep.
sweats.
All right. So you're picking sweats.
Yep.
You're picking Crocs.
Yes.
Paul Heath, what are you up? What are you up to?
It's a toss up, but I think I'd wear Crocs probably.
Wood. Okay.
Yeah. Showing up to a wedding in nice everything except a nice pair of Crocs seems better than a nice pair of shoes, but some sweatpants.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you could secretly dress up some Crocs, or at
That's
least wear
fair.
them to be kind of ironic.
That's fair.
It'd be hard to show up to a wedding and be like, "Oh, the sweatpants are just like ironically funny." It's
I've
like
seen it done.
No,
You can pull off the
just
athleisure look, but like
at a wedding though.
not at a wedding,
Yeah.
but every day you can kind of have like, oh, this is a nice looking outfit I got. But
All right, so I'm willing to admit that I do not own any Crocs. I never have owned a pair of Crocs, but everyone in my family does. So that, like I said, they're all lined up right in the entryway where people take their shoes off. So then there's 4 sets of Crocs that can be lined up in the entryway.
Yep.
I myself have never owned any, so I can't even say if I would think they're comfortable or not. Josh, based upon your strong endorsement, I think I need to get a pair.
They're comfortable for about 4 hours.
Okay.
That foam,
Okay.
it's not terribly dense,
Okay.
and so it'll
Not
get
a lot of arch support is what you're saying. That doesn't
yeah,
surprise me.
No. And so the
Yeah.
warmer they get, like on a hot summer day, I mean,
we're
they're
talking
The
just,
warmer?
We're talking temperature.
Bro,
is
they
changing the comfort of
literally
the
have
shoe.
holes in them to air your feet out. So
yeah, but that
Yeah.
foam, it almost starts to break down the longer you stand on
Crocs are
them.
dumb. That's what this sounds
Yeah.
like.
okay, well, I'm still choosing Crocs because I cannot wear sweatpants outside of the house.
Yep.
Sweatpants feels too much like pajamas. Like you're never gonna catch me just like, oh, let me just run to the grocery store and wear my sweats.
I literally wore sweats to the office this week. Does that bother you?
It does. No, it doesn't bother me at all that someone else would do that. And I am not casting shame on anyone. If you wear
so
sweats every day
funny.
of your life and you wear them out in public, great. More power to you.
New Heights staff members are in the clear if they wear sweats.
But for me, I just couldn't do it. Yeah.
So if you're listening to the podcast and you're hoping for sweats for the next New Heights merchandise drop, you're not going to get
No,
sweats.
but that's what I'm saying.
We're never doing sweatpants.
I'm in favor of wearing sweatpants around the house. But the moment it's like, nope, like I'm stepping outside, I'm throwing on a pair of jeans.
Yep,
All
I
right.
get that.
So to answer Paul's question, I'm picking Crocs, even though I've never actually owned a pair of Crocs before in my life.
You know, East does Croc Sunday.
I've heard about this.
Have you
this
heard
real?
about this?
I've heard about
Yeah.
this.
No,
Yeah.
that's
They
amazing.
And I've
literally,
seen
everybody
photos.
wears Crocs.
I
Yeah.
think I saw a photo where there must have been like 20 different
John Warren
feet.
too.
I believe John Warren would do it, yeah.
Is that a JP thing?
I don't know who's the instigator there,
Yeah, I don't know.
but they're all into it.
I don't know. I think that was more grassroots, just kind of organically took
love
over.
it.
People
and
were just like,
people
Crocs
were
are
like,
amazing.
We're wearing Crocs.
There's
Yeah.
also a couple families that have a lot of kids at East, and they
okay.
dominate the culture, and I love that.
Okay. So that means if all the kids have Crocs,
Dude, it's a
then
lot
it's
of-
like,
that's
all
a
right,
substantial
they're-
population.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
in.
it's fun.
Okay. All right. So listen, that brings us to this week. We're wrapping up the series called "Forming Friendships in a Lonely World," and this week our emphasis was on friends that are drifting apart, conflict that arises, and then is it possible for broken relationships to be mended? Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you guys, Evan and Josh, into the studio is because you are living, walking proof that broken relationships and broken friendships can, in fact, be mended. So you guys have quite the story. You've been friends for a long time. How many years have you been friends?
At least a decade.
At least a decade.
At least we met in the high school ministry here,
Okay.
and I remember that I didn't realize how much I liked Josh until he went to Europe. And he moved-
For like a month and a half over the
yeah,
summer.
like on a mission trip.
Yeah.
And then I remember all of our friends were like, "Where's that Josh Carlson guy? He's kind of cool. We haven't seen him in a while."
Wait,
And
did you not know he was going to Europe?
No, he just left, and then next thing we knew, he was gone.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Okay.
true story,
All right.
true story.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you guys been friends for a decade, then give me like a highlight moment for you. What's a funny moment that you guys have shared together?
Oh, well, one big moment, I think it would just be, and it was a series of moments, but our senior year when we all had cars and time,
And in a small group together here at the church.
Okay, you guys been in a small group together. That's good.
Yep.
and you introduced me to cliff jumping.
Oh,
at
yes.
Sunset
Ooh.
Falls, and those
We're-
are precious memories.
Yeah, we
Okay.
loved, Josh and I share a love of the water. Went to Hawaii together. Did a lot of like swimming and free diving and
Okay.
loved to swim. And
Yeah.
I think my highlight would be my small group experiences with Josh. I think high school and college, we had a real habit of hanging out, just consistent friendship. If you've ever had
Yeah.
that friend where you can just be yourself around,
Yep.
where you don't have to do the small talk thing, I think people will know what I'm getting at. Small talk friendships are great, and friendships take time. So don't bail on the friendships if they're still in the small talk moment.
Wait,
But-
does that? I feel like that's an indictment against this podcast because we always start the podcast with fun small talk questions,
Yeah,
and
no,
you're
no,
like,
no, no,
no, okay, Matt, this
Yeah.
is not.
no, it's
Paul, what are you
great.
thinking about?
I feel like these
What do you think about
questions are a
Evan?
little deeper than small talk.
That,
Yeah, I
okay,
do
thank
too.
you.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I mean,
I'm trying
honestly.
my best over here.
Yeah. So we've been friends for I think like 11 years probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably about 11 years.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
Yep,
the timeline.
over a decade. That's
Yep,
good. All
yep.
right. So, and over that decade, you guys have. It sounds like you traveled together. You've done Hawaii. You guys have been a community group together. You've done a lot together. Give me like your funniest. Do you have a funny moment together?
Can I tell?
Something on you.
Yeah, go for it.
So
Well,
Josh,
and again, I assumed the
Yes.
answer was yes, especially been friends for 11 years. So
Yes.
just lay it on us. And remember, podcast appropriate, please.
yeah, our college age, we tame. We were fairly tame. I love Josh. Josh is that friend. I think everyone has either a sibling or a friend that family loves to tell stories about.
Okay.
People have usually a sibling or a parent. Sometimes
Yep.
it's the dad. People like to have that. We love telling Josh Carlson stories and my friend group.
Okay, but this explains something because there was a Josh Carlson story that came to the surface last week on last
Yes.
week's podcast. So if you haven't listened to last week's podcast,
Go
please do
listen.
so because there's actually two women from your community group that were here in the studio, and they shared a story, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, well, Josh, we have this guy Josh Carlson in our group," and then they told a story about you. So you need to go back and listen.
I think it's because Josh is Josh takes a joke better than anyone I know.
Okay.
This is actually a real. I do not take jokes well at all. Okay, I'm like, and he's laughing because he knows that I'm like the worst person at this. Josh, for a long time, we have always called Phil Collins. Okay?
Phil Collins.
I don't know why that
Okay.
is. Is it because someone said you looked like Phil Collins?
Well, I think the name stuck after the
story.
event. After
Okay.
the event.
So
Okay.
some of the guys were calling him Phil Collins. It was like kind of a running bit that he didn't sign up for. And Josh just takes jokes. Well, I was like, haha, fun guys, funny guys. And one year, our young adult ministry here at New Heights, this is when Mark Hartley was the college pastor, we hosted like a Halloween dance party
Those are good days.
at one of the houses that
Okay.
a lot of the young adult men were living in.
Okay.
And there was a really grimy basement. Okay. That he lived in this house that cleaned up. It wasn't your fault that it was grimy. It just was old. And we cleaned out the basement.
Okay.
We cleaned out the basement. Luke and Levi Sparks. Some people will know them.
We literally, Luke and I disassembled our beds and I think moved a dresser. We literally cleared out our entire
Basement.
room,
Yep.
which was the basement.
Yeah, to
for
make
this.
room for the party.
Yeah. And we
So we literally moved out for one night.
Okay.
We moved every single
Yes.
thing out of
Yes.
the room.
And we
Yeah.
called it Shelob's Web, which is from Lord of the Rings, and put spider web things everywhere. And it was like a very
Oh, my
clean church
word.
young adult dance party thing.
Oh,
And Josh
my
Carlson dressed up
goodness.
as Dragon Ball Z. And then mid party, and Josh, you might have already can tell in the podcast, Josh can have a patient side to him as he's displaying right now. This man's a wild man.
That's good.
And he mid dance party went into the bathroom, shaved his head.
In the middle of the party?
Mid dance party.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And everyone notices when Josh is gone. So people are like, "Where's Josh?" And he came out, and you had obviously queued it up with somebody because somebody turned on "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins. Exactly.
Go.
And he reemerged into the dance party, shaved head, dressed like Phil Collins.
Yeah.
Absolute legends, dude.
Yes.
So talk about a guy who just, and this is a bit that he didn't sign up for. This is exactly why everyone
didn't
loves Josh.
sign up
no,
for it.
this is-
He's the one that shaved his
No, I
own
know,
head.
But that's why it makes
What did
Josh.
I miss?
This
Did
is
someone
what
pin him down?
Well, what
Shave his
I
head for
mean
him?
is the reason why people love Josh is because we didn't know whether or not he thought it was funny or annoying.
Right.
And then randomly,
Yes.
Josh just goes harder than anyone.
Yep.
Which is like JC to a T. Okay.
Got
and
it.
We just love it.
Got it. Okay.
People love Josh Carlson. You name drop Josh and he gets the people
Josh,
going.
when you shaved your head that night, did you have these long flowing locks like you have right now?
It was shaggy for sure. They wasn't
Okay.
quite. It
Yeah.
wasn't quite
Okay.
this curly, but it was shaggy.
Dude, it was a
but it
full
was
shave.
noticeable then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Well done, sir. Dude, that is commitment
It is
Yeah.
awesome.
to a joke.
It felt great. I had to go.
Commitment
I
to
had
a
to go
bit.
to the barber the next day to get. It. I
Yeah.
mean, we didn't.
Oh, to clean it up.
like-
Sure.
Yeah. Because we didn't get all of the little bits, so it looked
Okay.
pretty. It was like
Yeah.
Halloween scary Phil
It was
Collins.
amazing. It was amazing.
good.
It was amazing.
That's
it was
good.
Literally one of the best, probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was so fun. It was so good.
Paul, when you're editing this together, can you put the Phil Collins song underneath that whole story right there?
Sure,
Just then
sure.
have it like slowly building.
We'll do what we
All
can.
right. Okay.
That's good.
And thanks to Phil Collins
Yes.
for copywriting, allowing us to use that copyright of that song. So that's good. All right.
Thanks in advance.
Yes. Okay. So clearly, you guys have lived a lot of life together, had a ton of fun together, and then there was some moment when your friendship had this falling out. And again, that's actually what brings you here in the studio, because you had this falling out in your relationship. You guys went your separate ways, much like Paul and Barnabas in the passage that we looked at this weekend. And now, clearly, you guys are friends again. So we want you to walk us through. Just take a couple minutes here and walk us through what happened here in your friendship where you did have this falling out.
Yeah. I think similar to Paul and Barnabas, it just felt there was a series of silly disagreements, and I say that in hindsight because I see the time that we lost
Yeah.
after this. But it was so shortly after high school, and Evan and I were close.
Super close.
Yeah, I had visited him. So I was in Vancouver for a year. He went to school in Biola. I visited him there. And pretty much as soon as I went to school at Seattle Pacific University, that distance was not kind to us.
Yeah, to any friendship, because they're 15 or 1,200 miles apart.
Yeah,
so,
and I must say, if not to say like, oh, if you were here for our Pivotal Moment series, I shared about my experience at Biola with friends who kind of helped me when I was suicidal. Josh was that friend.
Okay.
So that happens that year. Like we were, just for context for people, very, very close. So the conflict that we were about to experience was not trivial.
Right.
And it was significant conflict enough that would cause a friendship that literally saved my life to basically be put on pause for a year and a half.
Wow.
And it's not just us two. There's a couple other guys that couldn't be here today that all kind of were involved in this.
Yeah. So I was already, I think, pressing into life in Seattle, and Evan was here in Vancouver. Yep. So we're less familiar with each other. And then I came back to visit. I don't remember when it was. Maybe you do, Evan. Mm-hmm. And it was like our values, just like our personal values that I've been developing for, I don't know, the 9 months. Mm-hmm. They didn't quite like agree, and we just went at it one night, and we were talking about dating, and kind of how, like, when you should do certain things, when you shouldn't, things that you should say, and there were some other things that really aren't a big deal, but we were starting to have some pretty serious relationships, and I guess so. Paul and Barnabas, they're arguing about who they're going to bring on their missionary journey. Right. It's just like,
so let me see if I get this straight. So you guys have been friends for years by now. You've already moved out of high school. You're getting ready to go to Biola. You're getting ready to go to SPU, if I get the timing right. And then you guys meet back up. So you have this time apart, but you meet back up, and then just so happened you guys start talking about dating relationships. And you guys have a difference of opinion about dating relationships.
I think what's important for people to know, for simplicity's sake, is that conflict rarely happens in a vacuum. So even though in hindsight, and actually not even hindsight, in the moment, the conflict that I'll describe felt very sudden and very immediate, it obviously did not happen in a vacuum. So this happened 2-3 years after college. Josh had been in Seattle, like he said. I was in Vancouver. And I think what it comes down to is Josh had expectations for our friendship that people were not meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was not meeting it. Max Gettles, who was not meeting it, who was your roommate. It got so bad that Max was like, do you want to room together again? And you said, no.
No,
and that was really hard.
I didn't live with him.
And that was really hard for Max.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of trend that we started to see. So then there was another year where you weren't rooming with Max. And that small group that we had started, we were Zooming once a week for years before this.
Yeah.
That ended.
Oh, wow.
So it went from talking every week, and that slow drift started to happen. And if you think about conflict in your own life, rarely does it go, unless you're walking through Portland and someone just randomly hits you, rarely does conflict happen so suddenly, right? There's always buildup that you might not be aware of. And I think that was the buildup, like Josh says. There was just distance.
Or if you are aware of it, it's kind of like, well, it's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
But given enough time,
I think that was
turns
where
into
I was
a big
at.
deal.
I didn't realize that I was actually at risk of losing my friend, one of my best friends. I had no idea. I just figured I'm kind of bad at communicating. Josh isn't that great at communicating. He's in college. I'm here. We're homies. I actually looked on my Instagram. I actually have a post before this next summer where I said, because we went to Canada together that year, I was like, man, I'm so excited to see Josh. And I had an Instagram picture of you and Max. And I had no idea that brewing under the surface was this pain that you were feeling in your friendships with Max and I.
Okay.
And it all came together in a summer evening, as Josh said, where what started as like a normal conversation, it's almost like two little kids and they're wrestling and then one person just pinches each other too hard.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it felt. Like we were talking about normal things that aren't weird for us to talk about: life, ministry, relationships.
Yeah.
And then it turned it painful.
Yeah. I was becoming overly protective, I think, of my guys, and I was really I was experiencing, I think it was a little bit of grief that we were no longer living in the same place.
Right. You mean the same town? Like
The same town.
Sure.
Yeah,
People were
think-
starting to date
Yeah.
seriously.
I mean, like one of them ended up marrying this girl, and I used I went into that conversation. So these are really serious relationships, and I basically went in guns blazing and said, I think that you are making bad decisions with these women that you're dating, and these
Spending
are
too much time with them.
these are bad relationships. And I didn't just suggest it. I said, yeah, this is toxic, and you guys need to take a step back, because I was just sad that I felt like
You
I was
bet.
losing my guys, and that wasn't even true, but it felt true.
Yeah.
And the things that I said were really, really hurtful.
Yeah.
And
So-
I didn't back down. They said, "Are you sure? You sure? Is there anything else going on?" And I said, "No, I just feel really strongly that you guys are not thinking straight."
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is all culminating on this one particular day.
Yeah.
But you said it's been building up to this, and then so you have this conversation. So it's this, you have this falling out, and now there's this gap in your
Yeah.
friendship. And so did you guys stop talking at that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. We stopped pretty suddenly because, as people might assume, what started as a conversation about Josh saying, "Oh, I'm having this hard times," and our friends are saying, "Are you sure there's nothing else going on? Because you seem really to feel strongly about this." People said things that they regret. If you've ever been in an argument with someone said something you regret, you'll know what that's like. I'm sure Josh feels like he said things they regret. I know we all felt like we said something that
That's
we
part
regret.
of like feeling like experiencing disagreement.
Yes,
and
exactly.
then emotions take over. You lose
Yes.
control. You say things you regret.
Yes,
It's kind
I
of
think
this pattern.
I remember that night feeling out of control. I remember I always like to feel like I can see the pitches coming, like a baseball analogy,
Yep.
and I felt like I could not see where anything was
Okay.
going. And I remember Josh driving away in the van that night, and us literally outside of his van window being like, "Don't you leave. Like, don't you leave." And Josh left because, he had that right. And we didn't, I remember, and this is where I think me and Josh have different experiences. I remember feeling so hurt. I felt like a friend of mine, we just fought and fought and fought. Conflict sucks.
Yeah.
It's horrible with your spouse or your friends. And I'm a deep feeler. And I remember him left, and my friends and I went back in the house and we're like, "Dude, what's going to happen?" And I remember not talking to Josh for another year and a half.
Wow, a year and a half, you guys.
It was a long time.
Okay, so during that time, I mean, obviously, you guys, during that time, you're looking back and you're saying, we used to be friends.
Yeah.
Are you guys living is this in Vancouver? You guys living in Vancouver at this time?
I'm still in Vancouver.
Okay. And you're living in Seattle. Okay. So there wasn't even that risk of like, well, we might bump into each other.
Well, except for one guy, Max Gettles, was living in Seattle. They were roommates, and he said he would run into you that year at Seattle, but it wasn't the same.
No.
So, like, even for guys who were living in Seattle
Yeah.
with Josh, and this isn't all Josh's own. Like I said, we just didn't know how. We did not have the tools. I wish I would have heard this talk. I did not have the tools at my disposal to know how to handle this kind of conflict, which
Yeah.
often happens when we're in conflict. We just don't have the ability or the perspective or the mentoring to deal with it. And so we had just gotten in this moment, I think, for like a year plus, where we didn't know how to reconcile. We didn't know how to get things back to where they were.
Okay.
Yeah, because to say to a guy who is thinking about marrying this girl, yeah, you shouldn't.
You should clarify that, by the way, because I don't think your perspective is that's because this is about, like, for example, guys that are still married. It was more about you wanting to spend time with them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just feeling the separation, the physical separation, because we were living in different places, and friendships, they need to change
Yeah.
with the times, and I knew that change was inevitable. I was just looking for some reason, some person to blame it
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
I picked the girlfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lost that
but
battle
Josh-
for sure.
But also that's not no one listening here is surprised by that, because every time someone moves from one life stage to the next life stage, there is there's a transition from one life stage to the next. And so of course there are relational transitions, there's life, people and where you're living and all that kind of stuff. So if it wasn't a transition, then it wouldn't be called a transition, right? So it's not surprising that you're feeling some of the weight of the loss of friendship as these friends are getting married or starting families or whatever. Then if you're not in that life stage, then of course you'd feel that.
And I think in conflicts, like on that, I just think that it's so hard to have grace for people when you're in conflict. I know it's hard for me. I am a arguer and a debater, and I defend myself. I feel like I treat every argument like it's life and death. I feel like that was my youth especially.
Okay.
And so because I was feeling hurt, I just close up. And the easiest way to close up is to just reinterpret the entire conflict in a way that paints yourself in the best possible way.
We all do that, though.
Totally, right? Where it's like, I am the victim.
Yeah.
I am the victim. And even if some of the hurt is legitimate, which I think some of it was on both sides, it's so interesting how you can demonize even your best friends or your spouse or your kids in times of conflict. It's amazing what we are capable of in our own hearts, which is actually kind of scary in Scripture when you read about how, I think in this passage exactly how much conflict can wound. And so in that year and a half, Josh went from somebody that I felt like was there for me to where I was like, man, I don't know how to reconnect with this guy.
Okay, I'm so glad that you're going here because this is the part that I would love us to take a couple minutes on is, so then how did you reconnect on that? After being quite close, best friends for years, then all of a sudden you have this conflict, falling out, you don't speak for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Now, how do you mend that broken relationship?
It's all you.
Oh, Josh, you raised your finger.
Oh yeah, no.
Is it a question or you got an answer on this one?
Yeah, I'll share.
Do it. We wanna hear.
He's the one who took the initiative.
Okay.
So.
Oh, great. Okay, we want to hear.
So I guess it was a year and a half later. I had a list of safe people and this was just my own list that I could call anytime and ask for help.
Yeah.
And I was actually, so I was in the hospital going through, there had been some mental health things building for actually years. So that kind of does shed some light on
in your own life, Josh.
In my life. And that does shed some light on the intensity of the things that I had said to these guys. It doesn't excuse it, but it does explain some of the intensity. And so those things came to a head and I needed some help. I was in the hospital acclimating to some medication.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus. I've used that medication ever since. But I was really lonely because you can't really see, or I couldn't see people super often in that place. But I had a phone and I just had a list of safe people that I could call. And I think it was probably midnight. It may have been the early hours of the morning.
Was this a hospital phone?
Yeah. So I just had a piece of paper with phone numbers. And
one of those numbers is this guy. It's Evan.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me because it always makes me emotional thinking about it because we just had no idea. And that's the real tragedy of conflict as Josh is describing.
Yeah.
Like, you never know what's at stake until you lose it. Like, you just never know what's at stake in a relationship until conflict takes things away. And we just had no idea that Josh was going through this. And it just sucks to hear as a friend, obviously, but keep going.
Yeah. So, Matt, I invited Evan into that situation. And it was just the phone call.
Right.
I mean, I guess he could have. The hospital was not close.
But Josh,
you were in like Everett.
You say it's just a phone call, but the weight of that phone call after having not spoken with him for a year and a half, the amount of strength that it took to pick up the phone, to dial those numbers, and to hear it ring and wait for him to pick up on the other side of that phone, especially if you're saying, and to add to it, it's midnight or whatever, it's in the early hours of the morning.
It was
like all of that just adds to the weight of the pressure of that call. And
not knowing if he would answer.
Yeah, of course. But you still made the call.
Yeah. And that was kind of the beginning. And there are other special events that we could talk about if we had time. But at that point, it was just a slow strengthening of our friendship, where I think there was a lot of just mutual inviting each other into because at this point you were
About to get engaged.
you were about to get engaged, and I didn't know Selena. I wasn't
Yeah, that's-
involved at all, and so
It's a lot of life there
Dude,
that's
I
been
think
lived over the past year and a half.
I had to be invited
Yeah.
into that relationship, and fortunately, I was at some point. And I've seen, I know Everest. I care.
Yeah, Selena loves
very-
Josh. yeah.
I care very deeply for Everest, but yeah, that was kind of the first moment, Matt.
So,
where-
and the good news is the fact that we are in the studio. You guys are friends, so we know how the story ends.
The Phil Collins story is post phone call.
oh yeah, Yeah.
But you both just mentioned something that is that it did. In order for you to mend this broken relationship, it did require a level of vulnerability on each of your parts. Josh, for you to pick up the phone and call, and essentially what you're saying is invite Evan back into your life, and Evan, for you to invite Josh back into your life.
Yeah, I remember getting that phone call, and it was because it was a hospital number. I was interning at the church here. I was working here. Actually, I'm trying to remember all the timeline. I think I was part-timer at this point. And anytime you work in youth ministry, you get like the middle of the night call. I assumed it was a parent. And I was like, so-and-so did this. And so I was kind of like getting ready for like, hi, this is Evan at like 1 a.m. He's like, this is Josh. It's like, Josh who? It's Josh Carlson. And I remember feeling so shaky in that phone call because I was so nervous to talk to you, but also immediately felt such compassion because he was so gracious to even call. I mean, even though you were going through so much, I mean, there's just so much graciousness in Josh. It's one of his giftings, I think. But I think you hit on something that it took a lot of vulnerability, and I think Josh did way better than I did. I think Josh, in that next year, it took us, I would say, it took me probably a year of like trust building. Because I think that
from the point of that first phone call,
Yeah.
your guys' continued interaction over the following year.
I think in my heart,
took that long to say,
which
like,
was
okay,
it could have been
we're
much
friends
shorter
again.
because
Okay.
Josh, the conflict happened, a lot happened, but when I really think about it, it's like there was nothing that Josh owed me in that moment, right? Like I was just holding things against him, and I think I was holding things against him because life had happened. I was like, I know you're going through a lot, but you weren't there for me, and I was doing the whole like list in my mind, and that was not fair to Josh. And I think some of the other guys have felt that also. We've talked about that. We're like, yeah, I feel like it was such a blessing. And it actually took outside perspectives. There was a couple other young men who moved back into Vancouver from college, Luke and Levi, who were like, wait, so why isn't Josh hanging out here tonight?
Oh,
and a couple of the guys were like,
Yeah.
yeah, why isn't Josh here tonight? And we had not re-invited Josh to, which is just, it sounds horrible. Josh needed our help, and he was not at small group immediately because I think guys were feeling frustrated. And
to clarify, that was also, and I'm so glad that there was this kind of this peace that the Lord would restore these relationships in some way in God's time, because this group of guys that would meet, that Evan was meeting with, it really needed to be a safe place of trustworthy people. And I was a little bit volatile at the time. I mean, just because I had said things in the past, I had been away at school, I was healing from some mental health things, and so it wouldn't have made sense right away for me to hang out with those guys. And I think I kind of understood that.
Yeah, from what I hear you saying, like you had to have some time for healing for you, but then also to re-engage with this friendship group as well.
Yeah, it went both ways. Because I don't think that would have been the right place for me to be, but for myself, but also, I mean, these are young guys that just finished college and they're processing a lot of life stuff, and they're thinking, okay, is Josh going to contribute in a good way or a bad way? We're not sure. We're going to give him some time. And they had every right to.
it's very gracious of Josh, as
They had every.
as usual.
That's what we're talking about, expecting the best. That's what I hear. I mean, you can either assume the worst, or you can expect the best. And Josh, what I'm hearing from you is it sounds like you're really expecting the best from these guys.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, I feel like, if you'd have had this conversation with me in the middle of it, I would have seen Josh as the villain, which is so natural to conflict. But as I've older, I've just seen how mature Josh is and how much grace Josh handled with such grace. I don't know how you'd feel this, because it's hard to compliment yourself, but Josh handled things with such grace, and I don't think it was reciprocated to him always in the time of healing. And I think that's sometimes it can be hard when we want to reconcile conflict. We want it. Some person in conflict might want it to go back to normal right away,
right?
And that can be really hard for people. And I don't think I was ready for things to go back.
It doesn't normally happen when a relationship is restored. It's rare that it's like, okay, it's perfect exactly the way it was before.
And I was so ready for it to go back to the way it was, but then I was also holding things in my heart that I knew I needed to forgive Josh for, because I knew he had forgiven me. And that was like, it took me a while to be like, oh man, like I need to like make this right with Josh. And it's just such a gift. Like, I know there are friendships that don't always happen this quickly, and a year and a half was a long time, but I know there's people who might be listening where it's been longer,
right? Especially
if it might be with a spouse or with a kid or a cousin, whatever it may be. And I feel like I just have all the grace in the world for those people, because I know me and Josh get to sit here and be like, we got through it, right?
Yeah.
And but it felt so heavy in the time and so hard.
So Evan, let's talk about that. I mean, because you bring up like this. Lots of us experience brokenness within our relationships, and you bring up like, so what does life look like when you're trying to mend those relationships? So you guys have already traveled this path. You were quite close. You have this year and a half like falling out in your friendship. And Josh, you pick up the phone, you call Evan. Over a period of a year, you guys continue to rebuild your relationship, and here we are, years down the road, and you guys have rebuilt this friendship from the ground up. So you guys are on the far side of this, right? You're on. I mean, it's not just light at the end of the tunnel. You're there. You're through the tunnel. But what advice do you have for individuals who feel like they're just entering into this space? Either that they feel this brokenness within one of their relationships, or they're just barely starting to reach out to the individual, or wondering, should I or shouldn't I reach out to this person with whom I have this broken relationship? So you guys are already obviously on the other end of this. So what advice or counsel do you have for individuals who are at the beginning stages? Josh, we're looking at you.
Yeah. Friendships, I think they are a tool that God uses to help us see Jesus more clearly and help other people see Jesus. And my friendship with Evan now, it has a little more maturity, because through that, there was the year and a half of not talking, and then a year of reconciliation.
Right.
I kind of had to realize that we are not becoming friends just because, we're having a ton of fun in high school, going swimming, doing these, like dance parties and stuff like that. Like, this is a relationship that we want Jesus to use. And so my little disagreements, annoyances, and I still have them, they kind of come second to the friendship, until they need to like really seriously be addressed. But I would just say that I'm so grateful for friendship that the Lord has given me, and also it is a gift. It's a gift that that is used for the kingdom as well.
Yeah. And Josh, what I hear you saying there, your summary there was, this friendship that you have with Evan today it's not based on a friendship of convenience, but it's based on a friendship of intentionality, where you're intentionally bringing it before the Lord and saying, Lord, I thank you for this friendship that you've given me. And also, Lord, would you use this friendship to refine me and make me more like you? That's a little bit of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, because when things got inconvenient, when we were living in different physical locations, when we were arguing about things, I didn't want that friendship. And that's why we didn't talk for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And so now, when things are inconvenient, like when Evan says, hey, my family needs a little extra attention right now. My baby can't sleep or whatever. Sorry, we're going to have to reschedule. Or, hey, I think my parents' house is in the path of a forest fire. Could you help move some of their possessions? Those inconveniences are just they're opportunities now for us to grow closer.
Sure. That's huge.
Yeah, that was a good thing.
I think for me, when I've even thinking about what our church is studying right now with in homecoming and friendships, I think one of the things that Josh wrote down, and I think I really think about this, is expect people to sin against us. Not that I'm saying that Josh sinned against me. I think we sinned against each other, actually. You know what I mean? In many ways, like all friendships have in relationships.
Sure.
I think that spiritual perspective about people is so, so important. I think that although I was a Christian and although I was growing and had a mature faith for my age, whatever that looks like, I think I had put people still on a pedestal. So when Josh had a mistake, man, it was world crushing for me because I wasn't expecting hard things to happen. I just wasn't ready to extend grace to Josh because I hadn't processed that Josh just needs grace in general. I think Josh was a guy I looked up to, and Josh was a guy that I had used for counsel in a hard moment in my life. Yeah. And I think so often in our friendships, we can elevate people to the place of Jesus. And so we're not ready to love them like the sinful people that they are.
Sure.
In the same way that we might not be ready to be loved in the sinful way that for the sinful people we are. So that'd be the advice I would give people, is to remind themselves that people that we should extend as much grace as possible. There's, of course, an appropriate conversation to have about boundaries and justice and reconciliation, but I think that's a conversation that can be tabled for another moment. I think our heart posture should be one of fearless grace for people. I know that people have shown that to me, and I haven't always shown that to others, and that's the kind of person I want to be. As a follower of Jesus, I want to be gracious towards others, and I feel like right now with Everest and babies, it's so hard because I feel like I'm just unavailable, and Josh has been very gracious in the last year as I try to figure out how to function with work and babies and all those types of things, and Josh still extends grace to me, but that's what we all want, right? We all want to follow Jesus and be gracious towards one another, which can be so hard to remember in moments of conflict when we're focused more on justice and getting right. And I don't think our heart should be to get right. It really should not be that. It should be to reconcile it, as hard as that is.
Yeah, and that comes back to what we were talking about this morning and through this weekend, is the Lord's desire is not to help us prove that we are right or that we can win a fight against someone, but rather the Lord's desire is to help us live in relationship with one another and to win the relationship, to win the friend, to demonstrate his loving kindness to the people that he's placed in our life and around us. So, and this is where I feel like I've seen you guys, you live this out. And like I said, the fact that you're on this side of that conflict is a testament to both of you having a strong relationship with the Lord and being able to live that out and demonstrate his kindness and love to one another. So I think it's a fantastic example. And
That's kind.
I'm grateful for you guys coming in to share your story here today.
That's kind. And I could just close on this one thing. And Josh, you wrote down,
do it.
I know from the talk today, you can win the fight, but damage your relationship in the process. I feel like that's kind of like our story. We got caught up in a night, not in a vacuum, of course, where people were trying to win a fight. Mm-hmm. Some people might have won, some might have lost, but everyone lost in the end. A lot of damage was done. And and I just feel like if that's your story too, it's like, man, some perspective and mentorship might be helpful. Maybe process it with somebody, what reconciliation might look like. I know it's been huge for us having outside help too.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I'm so grateful that you'd be here to share your story and let us get a snapshot of how the Lord's been working in your lives, not just over the past few months, but literally over the past decade, like years in the making. So it's been fun for you to take us along on that journey. So thank you. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that part of your story.
For sure.
And as we said at the top of the podcast, we said that this wraps up this 5-part series that we've done here on the weekend at New Heights, Forming Friendships in a Lonely World. But then that means it also wraps up this kind of segment of our Beyond the Weekend podcast. So
Exciting.
I'm looking over to Paul.
Not exciting. Sorry.
You can say it's exciting.
Yes, this is over.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so Paul, for Beyond the Weekend, we will continue to release a new episode of Beyond the Weekend each week. But for these next couple of weeks, we're doing something a little different where it's not necessarily tied to the weekend message.
Yeah, so the next 2 weeks,
Bring it on. Tell
we'll
us.
have some worship pastors on, and we'll be talking about the subject of worship.
Yes.
So if you guys have any questions or why do we do this, why don't we do this, or even just, what's your favorite worship album, send in those questions to podcast@newheights.org.
Okay.
No guarantees we'll answer every question, but send it in, and
good.
we'll be talking about that for the next 2 weeks.
So in the studio, who do we have? Do you know? We got Matt Nissen.
Yep, we got Matt Nissen, we got Becca, Chad. Yep.
Becca Pickrell, Chad Leonard.
I know
okay.
Chad loves to talk on stage.
Okay,
On camera. I
that's
love
good. But if you put Chad in the studio right
He
here in
kills
front
it.
of a mic, yep.
Dude, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Chad kills it in the same way he kills being on stage.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that's coming up here in these next couple of weeks.
Yep.
So give us the email address one more time if someone wants to submit a question about worship in general or something specific about worship. Where do they write to?
Podcast@newheights.org.
Podcast@newheights.org. All right, friends. So you heard it here. Send in your questions about worship, and we got a great crew coming in here into the studio these next couple of weeks to share with us. And in the meantime, thank you so very much for tracking along with us over these past 5 weeks as we've been going through this series, and invite you back next week. Tune in Beyond the Weekend for a little worship update. Okay. Thanks one and all.
Go Huskies.